Hello, my name is George Grant, and I'm a GGSPro Technical Specialist with Griffin. You may have heard of the GGSPro 5th edition reference guide, but most recently we actually came out with a Spanish edition of this guide. During this presentation, I'm going to quickly describe what is in this reference guide and why it is a valuable resource you may consider investing in. If you're familiar with the GGSPro technical team with Griffin, you understand that we prioritize the education for our growers. That is why every several years we update our technical reference guide, and now we are currently on the 5th edition. Most recently, we realized that there was not a good general resource for Spanish-speaking growers or managers, and so we decided to translate this reference guide to help out our Spanish speakers. In the guide, you'll see that there are 10 chapters as well as an appendix. Each of these chapters discuss a variety of different things that can be beneficial to every level of grower and every type of operation. We'll go through each of these now. Starting with abiotic disorders, these will be a variety of different disorders that both edible, ornamental, and medicinal crops can experience that are not caused by a living organism. For example, here we can see a section on edema, but there's a variety of other stressors, phytotoxicities, and pollutants that your plants can experience, and we included a variety of photos and descriptions as to why these things can be caused. Insect and mite pests are omnipresent for every type of grower. In this chapter, we'll go through the life cycle, cultural controls, as well as effective conventional and microbial-based insecticides and miticides that are effective against each of these common pests. We'll also briefly mention some of the BCA options that would be appropriate for each of these individual pests. As we'll see later on, there's an entire chapter dedicated to BCAs or biological control agents. In these chapters, you'll see very clear visual photos, hopefully helping growers identify the pests that they are seeing. If you grow plants, you realize at some point that we will run into a disease. Plant producers can deal with a wide variety of diseases depending on what they're growing and the environment in which they're growing in. Similar to the insect and mite chapter that we previously talked about, this chapter will be dedicated to diseases where we'll show clear photos on how to relatively identify individual diseases, as well as the conventional and biopesticides, specifically fungicides and bactericides, that can be used for each of these diseases. We also will group them into foliar, root, and crown diseases depending on where the pathogen actually affects the plant. As previously mentioned, we have an entire chapter dedicated to biological control agents, or BCAs. This will include your parasitic and predatory insects, your predatory mites, as well as beneficial nematodes. In this chapter, we'll go into each of these specific species and the type of pest that they are used for. We'll also talk about viability testing, application rates, and also using banker plants for specific BCAs. Oftentimes when we're growing plants, we end up growing plants that we don't intend on selling, and we call these weeds. In this weed chapter, we're going to help with identification of various different groups of weeds, the appropriate herbicides that are available on the market and what species these herbicides control. We'll also talk about specific herbicides that are labeled for greenhouse use, and oftentimes overlooked liverworts and nostoc algae, which can be very serious problems for some growers. We'll also talk about some control options with these specific species. PGRs, or plant growth regulators, are a variety of tools that are used in ornamental production. In this chapter, we'll go through many of the most common PGRs, which are growth retardants, growth accelerators, and PGRs that are used for other applications that are not necessarily always well known. We'll go into each one of these chemicals and some specific characteristics of how to use them most effectively. We'll also find a section dedicated to specific crop recommendations for a variety of annuals and perennials. Also, it's important that we can control crop growth using non-chemical options. We'll also discuss some of these strategies. As you can see already, when making this technical reference guide, our strategy was to be as holistic as possible, incorporating all aspects of crop production. One of the most valuable chapters in my mind is the water quality and crop nutrition chapter. In this chapter, we will be discussing a wide variety of information ranging from why and how to get your water tested, evaluating what is in your water, and how that dictates your crop nutrition or fertilizer program. We'll also go into individual nutrient deficiencies and toxicities, why they occur, and how to identify them. As previously mentioned, this is the 5th edition of the Technical Reference Guide. As this has been updated over the past several years, we heavily rely on the feedback and input from growers as to enhance this resource. Ultimately, we want to provide as much education as possible so we rely on the questions that we receive on a daily basis from our growers. As we've seen from our growers, two areas that we decided to implement into this 5th edition is on plant lighting and also plant scouting. Plant lighting technology can also be a very powerful tool when enhancing an operation. Over the past several years, growers have become more interested in adopting and trialing plant lighting technology because the amount of education and our understanding on how to utilize plant lighting technology has become more mature. In this chapter, we'll define a variety of terms that are now commonplace when it comes to plant lighting science. We'll also compare various different equipment options, including LEDs and HPSs, and we'll talk about the benefits or uses of various lighting technologies as it comes to photoperiodic, supplemental, and sole source lighting applications. And lastly, the final addition to our technical reference guide is the addition of the plant scouting chapter. Now, scouting is a very important set of SOPs, or standard operating procedures, that every operation can implement. This will include various techniques of record keeping, establishing action thresholds, as well as going through various pieces of equipment that can be utilized when trying to scout a crop. Scouting is very important for preventing and managing both abiotic and biotic issues. Thank you for your time today. If you should have any questions on the content provided in this presentation or anything else that comes up in the future, please feel free to reach out to GGSPro using the contact information listed on the slide. Thank you.